I might be.
Just tell us when it's all set up.
Okay.
I'm doing it.
Okay, so Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is the first film Disney ever made. And it's one of the most boring and forgettable films ever created. Disney remade it like 7 other times, all of them better, and yet because it's the first, everyone's like, yeah, that one's important. And like the evil queen is always put as like one of the big Disney villains, but like who the fuck actually fondly remembers the evil queen? Can you think of like a single piece of dialogue from her? And also, can we talk about the fact that Dopey looks like a sex pervert? Can we just talk about that for a moment? Anyway, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is forgettable and should be skipped.
I always liked Grumpy.
That's a shame. There's Pinocchio.
Grumpy was always the guy I felt like I would be in a Disney movie.
Pinocchio is a story about an old incel virgin who makes a horrible little boy out of wood, and the boy goes around being just awful, just the worst. And eventually they're both killed by a gigantic whale. And I mean like not natural at all whale, like a monster whale, a monstro whale, if you will. And the world rejoices. Fantasia tricks you into liking classical music by providing a lot of wonderful visuals, including the literal devil. As well as a bunch of crocodiles trying to dance with various African animals, and a segment with many retro dinosaurs, which, if you show them to people nowadays, they'd be bitching about how none of them have feathers. Dumbo...
No,
Dumbo...
alternatively, you show them to people who are so young that they don't even know that those are supposed to be dinosaurs anymore, because when they think of retro dinosaurs, they think of Jurassic Park.
Now, Dumbo is a movie about an elephant who... because he's the product of sex with the devil, as shown in Fantasia, has the ability to fly. But he is constantly tormented by racist stereotypes in the bodies of crows. Moving on, and continuing this animal theme, is Bambi, a movie about shooting the mothers of deer. It's nothing but 3 straight hours of a deer taking care of its child, only to be shot and then repeated. And like each segment's about 10 minutes, and it's a different deer with a different baby deer, and the baby deer always has to like go to the mama deer, and they're always dying in different ways, but it all involves a gunshot. And it all climaxes with the final mama deer whose head just blows up viscerally on screen, and the baby deer just cries. Skipping on, I haven't seen any. I have vague memories of Song of the South on a VHS, like on something that we recorded from television, and I remember it sucking, and I don't remember the racism, but I'm sure it was there.
It was there.
Then there's the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which is really 2 short movies smashed together because Disney was a cheapskate. The Mr. Toad part, there's a toad named Mr. Toad, and there's a badger named Mr. Badger, and a mole named Mr. Mole, and then a bunch of weasels who can't follow that naming convention because there's more than one of them, so they can't be defined there by their species. And also there's like this one guy who I think is Irish and really untrustworthy. And something happens involving a courtroom and a car, and I've never really been able to follow the plot, even when I rewatched it a year ago. But the other half of the movie is the story of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but with a lot of the anti-education subtext cut out, so that it's just a story of a nerd getting his ass kicked by a jock, and then he's murdered by a ghost. Cinderella was Walt Disney's first attempt to remake Snow White, but this time make it interesting, and it was a marginal success in that regard. It actually has a villain who's compelling, and also it continues the trend of Walt Disney just really hating cats. And it's a story about a princess, and she fucks a prince. Then there was Alice in Wonderland, which actually stuck to the book really close, in that it's a plotless mess that's just about a young girl meeting a bunch of weird people, they exchange wordplay, and then she leaves. And that's the book Alice in Wonderland, and thus it's the movie Alice in Wonderland. Peter Pan is a story about a sex pervert who kidnaps children, and is tried to be stopped by a valiant pirate, who in turn is going to be eaten by a crocodile who represents death, which will claim us all regardless of morality. Lady and the Tramp is about dogs, and continues Disney's trend of just really hating cats. Sleeping Beauty was Walt Disney's second attempt to remake Snow White, but this time make it interesting. And it vastly succeeded by this time just saying, hey, you know the princess and prince who are technically at the center of this plot? What if we made them supporting characters and instead focused on the cool 3 like old ass fairies who help them out? And also like the sexy as hell like fairy queen. Also, it contains one of the best cartoon dragons of all time, and also just one of the best dragons in film, period. Sleeping Beauty, 10 out of 10, would recommend.
And they say TT's boner grew 3 sizes that day.
Way to make this juvenile, Eddie. This is going on the internet.
Right?
Do you want people to think that we're crude?
I was going to agree with TT and say that... I was going to agree with TT and say that, yes, Maleficent is a fantastic villain, and I'm really glad that she got her own spin-off movie decades later, and even though it veers away from the original source material, it's still quite enjoyable, at least I think it is.
Okay, so 101 Dalmatians. This is a movie about 2 dogs who fuck way too much, and a woman tries to stop the problem, but they kill her. And then the dogs just keep fucking and fucking and fucking and making more horrible screaming dogs until the world is flooded with their black and white spawn, all screaming at mankind and shitting everywhere. And that's 101 Dalmatians. The Sword and the Stone is an adaptation of King Arthur, but none of the interesting parts. It's about Merlin teaching Arthur, and it turns out Merlin is, despite having magic, is one of the most boring teachers imaginable. It does, however, provide a very strange crack-fix solution to a lot of the problems that occur in Arthur's reign. And it's one of the weirdest fix ever written.
In the form of fucking a squirrel.
Crude. So then there's the Jungle Book, which is mostly okay. It's about a bear and a panther who are a gay couple, and they raise a boy. The boy is almost killed by a British hunter in the form of a tiger. But luckily, thanks to those two, and also a timely arrival of the Beatles, they managed to save the boy. It sadly continues Disney's trend of hating snakes. And also sadly continues Disney's trend of having just straight-up racist stereotypes, where an ape sings to the boy about how he wishes he could be like a man and be as intelligent as men. And the ape has the voice of Louis Armstrong, but is performed by a white man. And it's just... you're just really glad when they remade it and replaced all that shit with Christopher Walken instead. The Aristocats is about... a quartet of cats who are set to inherit a fortune somehow, and the butler decides that the logical solution here is to murder the cats instead of just waiting for them to die in like 10 years of natural causes as cats would do. And it leads to a great deal of fun antics, including a scene where a goose is drunk because people tried to marinate him, but they left the feathers on, which shows they weren't very good cooks. And also, sadly, has a lot of racist and ethnic stereotypes for some reason, because Disney got a Disney. Then there was Robin Hood, wherein all the normal shit in a Robin Hood story happens, only this time, they're furries.
Yep.
Then there was The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. It's light and fun, and it involves an awesome tiger named Tigger, a sweet but dumb bear named Winnie, a pig and a rabbit who both suck, an owl who's pretty cool, and a donkey who's relatable because he has extreme depression. Also, there's a kangaroo, I think. Then there's The Rescuers, which is about 2 mice who rescue children from child molesters. It's pretty good. Then there's The Fox and the Hound, which is about how people of different races just can't get along. And never will. Then there's The Black Cauldron, which is a movie about Taran, also known as Pig Boy, who's the worst little shit imaginable, who fucks up everything by being a self-centered piece of shit, and really should have been about his sidekick, Elanwy, who is a much more competent character, and more compelling, and, like, comes the closest of any of the protagonists to actually being like effective and proactive, but for some reason we're not focusing on her because she has a vagina. You know, sexism. But hey, John Hurt's in it playing a completely incompetent villain. Moving on, there's The Great Mouse Detective, which is the single best and most accurate to the source material adaptation of Sherlock Holmes ever written, despite, once again, being about them all being furries. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is about brainwashing children to want giant animated boobs. And it succeeded. Oliver and Company takes the dry, horrible, boring, tedious, overly verbose literature of Charles Dickens and actually just strips all of it away to the interesting story that Charles Dickens smothers with his terrible writing, and then makes them all furries and sets it in New York. The Little Mermaid is a story about a mermaid who is not actually much more significantly smaller than other mermaids, who desperately wants legs so she can go to an anime convention. And so she makes a deal with the drag queen Divine, who gives her legs. But she has way too many legs. She has 8 legs, and it gets wacky from there. DuckTales the movie, woohoo. The Rescuers Down Under is a sequel to the original Rescuers. It is once again about mice who rescue kidnapped children. Only this time, instead of rescuing them from a child molester, they're rescuing the children from a poacher played by George C. Scott, and it is honestly one of the most kick-ass Disney films ever made, and truly underrated.
Hey, man.
Beauty and the Beast is about a woman who wants something more, but settles for fucking a man who's like part ox or something. Also, there's a guy named Gaston in it, and he is just a hoot. Aladdin is about the whitest guy in the Middle East finding a giant blue Robin Williams and using it to fight the most Middle Eastern man in the Middle East. The Nightmare Before Christmas is another one of Disney's most wonderful films, and originally wasn't considered a Disney film. It was released under Miramax because Disney didn't want to be associated with something so good. It's about a skeleton, the anthropomorphic personification of death, who rules over a town that is responsible for the holiday of Halloween, and he longs to experience some things other than just his normal life. He finds Christmas, and it's a really nice tale about cultural appropriation for kids. Very similar to Lorax, where you actually sympathize with the villain of the story. The person who's causing the problem. Jack is sort of the antagonist as well as the protagonist. It's really good and it's really beautiful, and it's a really good story, and it helps you learn a lesson by helping you relate to the person who's on the wrong side of the conflict. It's really good, and it's got beautiful visuals and beautiful songs, and some people attack the pacing, and they're plebeians who should be castrated and crucified. The Lion King is the story of the Danish prince Hamlet, whose father was killed by his scheming uncle Claudius. Hamlet goes off for a bit to discover himself. When he learns this news, he doesn't know what to do. But eventually he's roused back into action by a visit from his father's ghost, and he comes back and everyone dies. But it's got Nathan Lane in it. A Goofy movie is about the worst teenager in existence, Max, who hates his lovable, kind-hearted father, Goofy, and makes his life hell, and never really faces consequences for it, and it's basically a cautionary tale for young children on what not to do when they reach adolescence.
That movie gave me nightmares for decades.
Pocahontas is a story about how there was only one guy who ever did something bad to the Native Americans during colonization, and after that it was smooth sailing.
Jesus shit.
The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
One thing I like, The Lion King also bears lots of similarities to the epic of Mansa Musa, and I'm asking Sundiata, also known as the Lion King of Mali. I'm just saying there might be a bit of a coincidence there. It may not be a coincidence there.
Google that, kids, because I have no idea what that is.
Sundiata is he's basically he's one of like the greatest heroes of like he's historical figures that highly romanticized.
The Hunchback of Notre Dame is about a real ugly guy who's raised by his Christian fundamentalist parent in a church. And he falls in love with a pretty woman, and the pretty woman's like, yes, let's be friends. And he's like, great! But then his Christian fundamentalist dad is like, a pretty woman.
Fucking Christ! You can't do that all of a sudden.
And then Kevin Kline is there too. And the pretty woman marries Kevin Kline. The ugly man kills his Christian fundamentalist father and is beloved by the townsfolk for doing so. And it all ends happily, even though our protagonist does not get his dick wet. Which a lot of people take issue with, but hey, sometimes ugly people just don't find love.
Wait, did you do the Rescuers Down Under?
Yeah, I fucking did.
Oh, sorry.
Hercules. Hercules is about making as many Easter egg cameo in winking jokes about Greek mythology as possible, while also getting as much of the story and themes of Greek mythology wrong as you possibly can. In that they try to make the story of Hercules the story of Superman and also the story of Rocky, but none of that matters because James Woods, despite being an awful human being in real life, makes a wonderful villain as Hades, like an enjoyable villain as Hades, and also the art design is killer. Mulan has the single greatest song ever made to pump a human being up, I'll Make a Man Out of You. Which I have used several times when I was a teacher to get students' attention. Let's get down to business to defeat the Huns. It's a story about a woman who pretends to be a man because she's a protagonist in a Shakespeare play, joins the army, and saves the world with the help of Eddie Murphy, who plays a dragon. Doug's first movie is Xanax in film form.
That was Disney?
That was Disney.
What the fuck?
What?
By the way, I'm back for a little bit anyway.
Tarzan. Tarzan is the story of a man raised by apes who all did their best to hide the fact that they were jealous of his proportionally staggering penis.
To be fair, that's very accurate.
Fantasia 2000 is basically the original Fantasia, but not quite as good. Not bad. The animation's technically better, but just not as,
Artsy.
just not as good. The Tigger movie, I didn't see it. Disney's Dinosaur is about dinosaurs with weird, fleshy human lips that make you resent God for creating them. They also have a group of parasitic lemurs that crawl on their skin and slowly eat them from the inside out every night. It's a really horrifying movie, and I'm not sure why Disney made it.
Lane's going to murder you for that, TJ.
The Emperor's New Groove is a story about a sorceress named Yzma and her stupid henchman Krunk, and they have a bunch of really wacky, fun, slapsticky adventures. And also David Spade is in some of it, but no one really cares. Atlantis the Lost Empire is Disney's adaptation of Nadia, Princess of Blue Water, but with art designed by Mike Mignola, which is also the most notable thing of the film, although the cast of characters is diverse and interesting, even if they don't really get much to do. Return to Neverland, I did not see this film. Lilo and Stitch could quite possibly be the best thing Disney ever produced. I mean, okay, Nightmare Before Christmas, since it's technically a Disney film now, beats it, but Lilo and Stitch is fucking good. It's about a girl who's being raised by her older sister because their parents died, and about like broken homes, but it's also about aliens. There's like an alien who she gets to pet. It's just fucking great. It's got that guy from Kids in the Hall, and there's like some gay subtext. It's all just it's really good. It's some good shit. It's just good shit. Treasure Planet.
It's about an alien doing the absolute worst impression of an Earth dog you could possibly imagine.
This is true. Treasure Planet. I did not see this film.
I did.
It was okay.
But it's about a planet that is made of treasure. Piglet's Big Movie is a big movie about Piglet, I assume. I didn't see Brother Bear or Teacher. They made a Teacher's Pet movie?
Yeah,
That hideous show?
Brother Bear.
That god-awful show got a film? Home on the Range. Home on the Range. I haven't seen it, but I do know that it's a movie about 3 cows, all of whom are voiced by actresses whose breasts are very large, and like somewhat notoriously so, and I just feel like someone who made that film was a pervert.
I've seen that film. We actually
that movie gave me very strange emotions as a kid.
I'm gonna have to start skipping some more because we're getting to the part where I did not see Disney movies because they all looked like garbage. I saw Chicken Little. It's about a chicken who thinks there's an alien, and there is. I saw Meet the Robinsons. It has like a bajillion characters in it, and 2 of them matter. And also there's a T-Rex who wears a bowler hat, and you'd think that would be a main character because it's a T-Rex that wears a fucking bowler hat, but instead he's like a gag for 3 minutes, and most of it was shown on the fucking trailers, so it's like, you wasted him. You had a T-Rex in a bowler hat, and you wasted him. You wasted him, Disney. What the fuck is wrong with you? So then they made... I guess they... Bolt? What the shit? I think some of these are jokes. Okay, The Princess and the Frog. That's the next one on the list that I've seen. That isn't a Pixar film. Okay, The Princess and the Frog.
Oh, G-Force I fucking loved as a kid.
The Princess and the Frog is a movie about a woman in the 1920s, a black woman, whose best friend is a rich white family, because that's exactly how history worked. She's a poor black woman in the 1920s whose best friend is a rich white family. That is exactly how history worked. It is literally our history. White people, especially rich white people, have always been the best supporters of poor black people. Jot this down. This is Disney law. Anyway, she gets turned into a frog, and so does like a prince, and they bone, and that's the movie. Tangled. Tangled is it's a counterpart to The Hunchback of Notre Dame in that it's a story about dealing with an abusive parent. It's about a girl who's kidnapped by a witch who steals her hair at night and eats it. It's really creepy, and eventually she kills that woman with a frying pan. Romeo and Juliet exists, and we are damned to hell as a species because of it. Frankenweenie. I guess that's a Disney film? Okay.
No,
I think of it in like the similar vein as to like Nightmare.
I've seen Frankenweenie. Frankenweenie is about a little boy who brings his dog back to life like Frankenstein, and then it spirals into everyone bringing their dead pets back to life or killing their pets to bring them back to life. And it's really good, except one of the main antagonist is one of the most horrendous Asian caricatures I've seen on screen. Like it's near Mickey Rooney levels of just like hating Asian people, and it's like, this was made in 2012. What the fuck? Like, this is super overt. What the fuck, dude? What the fuck? Then there's Frozen, which, when summarized, sounds like a really good movie. It's like, it's great. It's about 2 sisters and their drama, and like one of them has like ice powers and is an ice queen, and on paper it's like, this sounds kick-ass. And the problem is, they never made a script. They made like a rough outline of a plot that was about a page, and then someone turned all of that into dialogue, and then they made the film based on that. They never like fleshed anything out, and the result is a super fast-paced movie where nothing's ever really developed, and it's like, I would love to see these characters and plot in a story that's finished, or even, like, close to finished, or, like,
I mean, is that
more
like
than just barely started. Like, Frozen is the equivalent of eating eggs and flour and raw butter and thinking it's bread. Then there's Big Hero 6, which is about a boy whose brother dies, so he makes a robot to kill the world.
Pretty accurate.
Then there's Strange Magic, which I think was just 2 straight hours of George Lucas masturbating on camera, and was the last film he ever made. Why isn't Wreck-It Ralph on here? Because that's a Disney movie.
You passed it a while ago.
Oh, I guess it was before Frozen. Okay, so Wreck-It
That's
Ralph.
2012.
Wreck-It Ralph is it begins as a movie about video games. You follow a video game character named Ralph Wreck-It, and his job is to build buildings, and everyone hates him. And he travels to the video game world where he has sex with Bowser, and eventually decides to just stay in the other video games. And then, after the first act, it becomes a movie about candy puns. And it's just about making as many puns about candy and donuts and shit as possible, and it forgets that video games even exist. And it all ends with, like, everyone just having full-on frosting bukkake. Okay, so we got to Big Hero 6, Strange Magic. Zootopia. Zootopia is about intersectionality and oppressed groups. Everyone's like, Zootopia is about racism. And it's like, no, that's actually oversimplifying a Disney movie, which shouldn't even be possible. But, like, it's about how, like, if you're a group that faces oppression, you can still oppress other people, even if they sometimes oppress you. Like, it's actually really complex and really good. And, like, a lot of Disney movies that take a subject that's really hard for other people to adapt because people think it's too complex, it does it using furries, which seems to be just the magic way to make a really complex topic digestible. Like, when people live action adapt Sherlock Holmes, they have to reduce him to one character trait and just pretend that's all he's about. Like, he's always got to be the asshole or an addict or smart. He can't be all of those things. But Disney, they're just like, no, we can do all those things at once. We just have to make him a mouse. And so too is the way with the complexities of oppression and class and racism and gender politics and sex politics. Disney's like, we can teach this to kids. We just need to make everyone animals. Moana is the story about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and a Hawaiian princess traveling to do heart surgery on a volcano. And along the way, they fight Jermaine Clement in the body of a giant crab. And it's very good. And, that's Disney.
What about that 2016 Jungle Book?
I'm surprised you didn't delve into
that is not a Disney cartoon. That's a live-action Disney film, and that's a whole other kettle of fish.
I would like, before I stop doing this, I would like you to go down the Pixar thing again, because I did not get that one on camera.
God damn it. Okay, give me...
And
Are you
then
recording this, Casa?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna go down the Pixar list. Okay, I'll try to remember all the jokes I made, but I'll probably end up making some new ones.
It's fine.
That's hardly a bad thing.
I'm surprised you didn't jump into the comic that got so famous overnight.
The first Pixar film that was ever made was Toy Story, which is about an evil cowboy who runs a dictatorship amongst other toys in a boy's room. And one day, a astronaut comes to this dictatorship and shakes things up, and the cowboy tries to kill him. But the murder attempt goes foul, but thankfully the astronaut is so stupid he doesn't catch on, and the cowboy is able to trick him into providing him a cover story so that he can go back to his dystopia and rule once again as an evil tyrant. And he does so, and it succeeds, and the two of them rule together with the cowboy on top once more. It's a really dark story. This was followed by A Bug's Life, which is about an ant named Woody Allen and his best friend Sylvester Stallone. They are both creepy because Woody Allen is a pedophile, both in real life and as an ant.
He also says
Hey, who's telling the stories here? The two of them go off on an adventure, and it's also like an adaptation to Seven Samurai, but really it's an adaptation of The Three Amigos, which is a parody of The Magnificent Seven, which in turn is a ripoff of Seven Samurai. So it's very layered. It's a very layered story. This was followed by Toy Story 2. In this one, the evil dictator Woody the Cowboy decides to renounce his throne because he's realized that why should he settle for being a king among toys when he could be a god? And he goes off to ascend to godhood and be the idol of millions. But the other toys, desperate for their leader since their horrific dystopian life is crumbling without this dictator's rule, go on a great journey to bring him back, and Woody consents on the condition that they worship him like a god. And so his iron rule, his cruel, tyrannical rule, is even further cemented. Monsters, Inc. is a story of a bunch of monsters who are all homosexual, and two of them adopt a baby. Finding Nemo is a story of a fish who drives his son away and then teams up with Ellen DeGeneres to get his son back, but is horribly eaten by Australians. The Incredibles is the only good film adaptation of the Fantastic Four. Ratatouille is the story of a rat who makes spaghetti, and this was somehow so good that it beat out a heartfelt and beautifully animated story of a young woman growing up under the misogynist rule of the Taliban. And thus Ratatouille won an Oscar over Persepolis because humanity is garbage. WALL-E is the single most beautiful film Pixar has ever produced. It's about a young robot named WALL-E, who is the last robot on Earth, until one day a robot from space comes and he falls in love. And through his love for this beautiful robot woman who kill him without a second thought, just a flick of her wrist, this beautiful, strong warrior woman, by loving her, he saves the world. Up is a 7-minute short film about a man whose wife dies and never had babies. And that makes it the saddest film ever made, apparently. And there's like another whole feature-length film after it, and I guess the Oscars thought, that counts as one whole movie. And decided to make it the best animated feature of the year when it was running up against two very creative and beautiful animated films, Coraline and The Fantastic Mr. Fox, all because that 7-minute short film was apparently really sad, and they didn't care that the rest of it was forgettable cartoon. Toy Story 3. In Toy Story 3, Woody's evil days finally get to him, and his entire civilization crumbles. And it's most well known for its iconic shot where Woody and all of his followers are slowly dragged into the pits of hell. And as the gaping chasm of hellfire opens to swallow them, they all clasp hands and accept their fate until they're saved by aliens. True story.
Weird.
Brave is the story of a young girl, a princess, who is a raging furry, and she just wants to go to Anthrocon, but this time she wants to prove all the other members of Anthrocon that she's the best furry. She wants a real fursuit, a fursuit that actually makes her an anthropomorphic bear. So she goes to a witch, and the witch is like, well, you can't be a bear. You're not an older man with a lot of hair. And she's like, no, not that, a literal bear. And the witch is like, oh, okay. So the witch gives her a magic fursuit, but warns her not to let anyone else wear it, or else they will become the bear. And she's like, yeah, I got it. But hilariously, her mother and her 3 younger brothers all beat her to wearing the fursuit, and they wear it at once, and they all become one unibear. And it's a twisted, horrific, stunted existence. And long story short, she doesn't get to go to Anthrocon, and it's really sad. Monsters University is a story about how Billy Crystal can't keep an erection. Inside Out is the story of a world where every human being's skull has been hollowed out, so that 5 horrific Technicolor brain goblins can steer their bodies like puppets. With one of them voiced by Amy Poehler. The Good Dinosaur is a story about a dinosaur and his pet boy, who's a human boy, which is kind of weird, but I guess, for all of you who think that human pets are your fetish, you finally got representation in a cartoon, so good for you. It's a pretty standard coming of age tale, except it's missing its third act.
I'm sorry.
Like it's got 2/3 of a story, and like those 2/3 are good, but it's like there needs to be more, and there isn't, and that's the Good Dinosaur. Finding Dory is literally just Finding Nemo again, but they changed the title, and now one of the fish is voiced by Amy Poehler. And then finally, the last Pixar film is Coco, which I haven't seen yet, but looks really good. I have heard that there's a 5-hour short with Olaf the Snowman from Frozen in it, so I'm kind of waiting until it's on home video so I can see it without that.
Actually, they took that out.
Good.
Because there's so much outrage.
Good. And that's Pixar.
Yeah, the only DreamWorks.
You wanna? Is there an outro you wanna put in there, TT?
Oh.
Yummy, yummy, yummy. I've got love in my tongue.
That's what you want to go with?
Yep.
That's nice.
I would be up for doing DreamWorks.
Okay,